Hey, and welcome to another episode from the Postapocalyptic Garage. Today we will have to start our video with a disclaimer. So everyone who is following my channel for any amount of time knows that I'm really into the topic of axes, and I've already made a video about why I prefer an axe over a knife. If you haven't seen it yet, feel free to check it out down in the description box below. But the thing what I want to talk today is that most of the guys who are in survival today have a fixed budget. So especially when it comes to axes and blades, you really get what you're paying for. When I take myself for an example, I personally carry the Boker Fox Rolled Black as an EDC, and this little knife here is worth a little over 200 bucks. It's a really good knife, it's made from D2 steel, so really hard, a little bit on the chipping side, but overall a pretty good knife, but especially after all, a knife with a really high price tag. When it comes to axes, I pretty much prefer the ones that I made myself, like this one here. It's a really light kind of all-purpose hatchet, but when you take into account that I have to spend hours and hours in the workshop to make one of these, and when you want to buy such a quality, you have to spend really a substantial amount of money. And when you're buying it from an online store or a regular store, you always have to pay about 150-200 bucks, and the question is always, is it worth it? Quality-wise, in most of the cases, it's definitely worth it, because when you pay for a handcrafted piece of cutlery with a really good edge and really good edge retention, which is made of really high quality material, you get something for your money. But what if you just don't have 200 bucks to spend on an axe or a knife? And talking about your priorities, especially from my point of view, I have 2 children and I spend really a lot of money in my day-to-day life. So is it worth to spend 200 bucks on an axe when you can get it a lot cheaper? And that brings me right to my disclaimer. I've been contacted in the last years by a variety of companies which wanted to give me some kind of items or survival gear to review, and I've always rejected them because, I take this whole topic really serious, and I'm kind of an influencer, I guess, so I don't want to talk about things that I don't stand for, really crappy things and products which I'm not using myself. I can't recommend them to you because, I get money for it and all of that, but when I recommend something to you, I want it to be a thing that I use myself. And the problem with many really high quality stuff is that the companies and the customers know that it's really high quality, so they need no advertising. For sure they need a little bit of advertising, but for example, when you take the Unimog vehicle, it was made in Austria and Germany. It's the Mercedes-Benz all-purpose vehicle for everything, which is around for decades now, and they have made commercials when they started, but they make no real commercials since then because everyone knows that it's good, and companies and governments and militaries all over the world are buying them because they know they are good. So they don't need YouTubers or something like that to get a shout out because everyone knows that they are good. And as far as I know, a channel in my size especially will never get something like my Boker here because number one, it's a really high quality piece of steel, and when you use it, you know it's good, so you have to advertise it at some places, but you don't really need the really offensive advertising that some of the cheap brands use to get around. And when I do advertising for a really cheap brand, my problem would be that I lose a lot of credibility and you won't take me as serious because yeah, just about the money and not about the product. And that was the reason why I never really wanted to do things like that. But then about 2 weeks ago another company came up to me, and it was battlemerchant.com. And yeah, they sell a lot of stuff, especially when you're into reenactment or HEMA. They sell everything from trainer knives, which are made of rubber, to chainmail and shields and reproduction things from different centuries. And I first was not really into this whole stuff because I'm no HEMA channel, I'm no reenactment channel, but they also have really good quality knives, especially from cold steel, even when I'm not really a friend of old cold steel things. They have a few really good things. And yeah, I spoke to them, and my point in the whole conversation was that if they send me something that I think is crap, I will say in the video that it's crap. And they were the first company who said, yeah, it's okay, we'll send something to you, and if you make a positive review, we will appreciate it. And if you think it's not as good as you want it to be, just say it and we will be okay with it. So that was the main reason for me to accept this offer. After all the talking, they gave me the opportunity to search around on their homepage, and I have to say they have over 6,000 items in stock. So if you're at least a little bit into blades and knives and axes and all of that, you will find something that suits you in any case. So they have really well-made, handmade axes for well over 200 bucks, down to things that costs only 19 bucks. And they have one product in particular which I absolutely wanted to know what it is like. So they have a little hatchet, and they claiming that it's handmade, they claiming that it's high quality, and they sell it for 19 euro. So about 23 bucks in US currency. So I saw that, and my idea was, yeah, it is a pretty good steel. It's made of an equivalent to 1065 about this. So I know what I can expect from something like an axe which costs 19 euro or $23. So I had an idea, especially in the context which I've talked before. So the survival or prepping on a budget, it can be a really good thing to get some things like blades cheap and make something really reliable and something which you can depend on with your life, basically. So I've made myself a challenge. I've ordered an axe which have the form that I really like, which is made out of a pretty good steel, which have a handle which is made out of a really good wood, and the challenge is to make it into something which is reliable. And I've got it today, so why not showing it to you? And this is what I've got. So I've ordered this because it's kind of my favorite blade shape. It's a small hatchet with a little bit of a beard. It feels really good in the hand. It's relatively light and it's really maneuverable. And yeah, I like the form. The steel is, as I said, 1065, so it's not really into the area of steels that chip really easily, but it holds an edge pretty good when you've got an edge on it. So this is my first kind of criticism. When I buy an axe, I want it to be reasonably sharp. It don't have to be shaving sharp, it surely don't have to be razor sharp, but it have to be at least a little bit, like it have to be, at least you have to carve with it, so a little bit of carving or debarking would be nice. And I got this one with a flat on it, so there's a 1mm flat which you can make this movement with your finger across the blade with a pretty substantial amount of pressure, and it will not cut you. So yeah, that's the first criticism I have. But hey, it's good steel. It's definitely hand forged. So many of you know that I've learned the profession of a metal worker and blacksmith in school and in a company. And I see when something is hand forged, and I see when something is cast or made by stock removal, and this thing is forged. I'm definitely sure that it is forged, and I can't really believe that it's only 19 bucks. So yeah, really good quality after all of the steel, but the edge could be a little bit sharp. To get on with the criticism at first, there is another point which annoys me a little bit. So the handle is pretty thick, and at first I thought that's amazing because you have a reasonably small amount of metal and a really thick handle, so it's a light axe head on a really sturdy handle. It have to be really reliable. But then I noticed that the amount of metal, or the thickness of the metal here, is a lot more than it is here. And when you look closely, and I will show you some close-ups of that later, you see that the handle is carved down here with, I believe, a bandsaw, and it's basically undercut. So even when the handle here is about, I would say, 4 centimeters, it's a lot less in the eye of the axe here, and that is such like, yeah, just like it should break at exactly this point. So it will never break here. It will definitely break here because, yeah, they cut basically into the grain with a bandsaw. So I don't really like that, but the handle, and I've tested it, is definitely, they claim it to be rosewood, and I don't know if it is rosewood. It can be, due to the color. It can only be stained for sure, but it's really reasonably hard. I've tried it out with a file here, and it's a really hard kind of wood. It's definitely not as good as an ashwood handle will be, but rosewood is, yeah, it looks pretty, it's reasonably hard, and what's especially important is that the grain of the wood runs exactly along the handle. So especially on cheap axes, you often get handles that are cut out without any carefulness of wood, where the grain runs particular to the handle, and they break really easily. So you hit a hard object and they snap right into here. But this one is reasonably well made, and again, for 19 bucks, it's okay. Another thing what I don't fully understand is why they paint it black. So you see, due to the surface of the blade, it's hand forged. So when you forge something, there is a scale on the metal, which is probably the best rust proofing, the best natural rust proofing you can get, and they've painted it with some kind of black paint. It's really hard to get off, so it's not abrasive kind of paint, I think, but they painted it. So why they do this. There is not really a good point of painting a blade like this. It's just my personal opinion. Maybe someone of you likes the blades painted, but I think when they just leave the scale on and grind the edge on it, so there's a color differential between the edge and the body, it will be a really nice thing. So why they painted it, I have no clue, but I think we will get rid of that. But enough talking for now. Let me show you how you can optimize a budget axe like this to make it a really reliable piece of equipment which you can depend on every day of the year. So the first thing we want to do today is get the handle off the body or out of the eye of the axe and see how it is attached at all. Well, that went a lot easier than I thought. Okay, so now that we have the handle off, we see immediately one of the biggest problems. It went a lot easier than I thought, and I'm really surprised how easy the head came off. And when I'm looking at that right now, I can see why. The wedges which are driven into it are purely show, and I think you can expect that from a $19 axe. But speaking of the wood, I'm really surprised it's actually rosewood, so there is definitely no stain on it, and you can see the fine grain and the lightly reddish brown color, so I have got what I paid for. And actually, only with this handle I've got a lot more than I paid for. So when you have ever bought a rosewood handle for something, you know that it's kind of expensive, so I'm really surprised, I have to say. Also, I have to say that my first prediction was definitely right. It is cut with a bandsaw, it's smaller than the actual diameter of the handle, and I will get you a close-up of this right now. So you can see that that's really a part which will break at some point. Regardless of how you use it, it will break, definitely. Here you can see a pretty deep undercut. I don't know why they did it. I think it's some kind of carelessness by the producer, but I don't really like it. So we have to definitely tweak a little bit here. But as I said, quality of the material, not so bad at all. First thing we're going to do is get rid of this kind of awkward black paint. So I've attached a wire brush in my little drill press here. I've set it to the highest rounds per minute. It's about 2500, and yeah, let's get it off and see what's beneath it. Okay, so now I'm really more surprised than before. You can see now it's definitely hand forged, and under the paint is a really nice scale, so it wouldn't have rusted for the next maybe 20 years. So I don't understand why they put it on, maybe just because aesthetics or looks, but I prefer this kind of look, and now we will get on with the handle. The original handle was looking like a tomahawk style, so really narrow at the end and really thick near the axe head. And when it is mounted like a tomahawk, that makes perfect sense. And there are also records from the year 1000 AD where there were Viking axes mounted like tomahawks, so that will be perfectly appropriate. But when it's mounted like this, yeah, not so much. In addition to that, I prefer when the point where you grip it, so the end of the handle, is thicker than the piece where the handle meets the head. So we will just turn this handle around, so this should be relatively good fit for the axe head, and we will get rid of this undercut part here. We will retain a decent amount of length, and it should be good for everything an axe should be good for. So let's cut it off, shape it a little bit, and see how it works. So I think this way around it looks a lot better, at least to me. You have it a little bit thicker here at the end. It's really nice balanced still, and now you see that the whole thickness goes through, so you have no cut against the grain, and you have the whole handle basically in the eye of the axe, and this would be a whole lot sturdier, a whole lot more reliable than any other way to mount an axe head on a handle. But before we're going to mount it, let's get an edge on it. So now that we've got the basic profile in with the belt grinder, so the profile is just kind of this edge, not a hollow grind like you see on a lot of knives and swords, not a straight grind which you see on a lot of survival knives, for example, but a little bit of a bulged edge. Don't know exactly how it's called, but you get the idea anyway. So we've got it in with the belt sander, and now we want to take some 240 grit, put a little bit of wood in it, and finish it up by hand, just like in the old times. Only that we're using sandpaper, which is not really old times, but yeah. After the sandpaper, to give it the last edge if you want, we will resort to our Arkansas oilstone, and I have a quick tip for you. Use automatic transmission fluid. It's much better than the stuff which comes with the stones, and yeah, once you've tried it, you will love it. After the majority of the oil has soaked into the stone, we can start to form our final edge. When you stop seeing the grind marks from the sandpaper and have only the stone finish on the edge, and your edge is reasonably sharp already, you can resort to the much finer grit on the backside of the Arkansas oilstone. After the sharpening, it's really important to get a pretty substantial and thick edge on it, so it's sturdy enough to do things like that. And even after that kind of abuse, it should be able to make pretty clean cuts in some thin paper like this one here. Now we have a pretty good edge on the axe head right here, and we've also have the handle in the configuration that we want, so let's marry them together and fix it and see how it works. And like I do it on all of my homemade axes, I prefer the simple and old wedge method over anything else basically. Okay, after all of that, I think it came out really good. So it's perfectly balanced in the hand, it's sturdy as it could be, it's reasonably sharp for the steel which it is, and I think this video has shown to you that it's not only important how much you spend on something, but how you treat the things you have. And I know many of you will say that it's just a sponsored video and he's just saying that because he gets paid for it, and I can assure you I'm not. I've got this little 19 euro hatchet for free, and I'm completely free to make this video as I liked it. And sadly, as many of the YouTubers out there do today, I could just say it, yeah, it's a pretty nice axe or hatchet and you can make a lot of stuff with it, but I'm not, because in its original state it's a really nice piece, but a not really usable in any kind of circumstances piece. And because of that I really want to thank battlemerchant.com again for giving me the freedom and giving me the opportunity to give my honest opinion about their product. And as you all have seen, it's a really nice deal, it's really well made, and as you all have seen, I'm not only positive about this product, but if you don't have two left hands and if you only have the least amount of technical understanding, you can make something really good out of it. And I think in this state, which it is now, it's definitely comparable to an axe which costs 100 bucks, 120 bucks, you decide. And as I said in the beginning, I'm going to prove it to you. So stay tuned for my next video, where I'm going to make an overnighter only with this axe and a wool blanket in the Tyrolean Alps here in Austria. So thank you for watching. Thank you guys at battlemerchant.com for making this video possible, along with all of my Patreons, because as you all know, I don't really get paid from YouTube anymore, so the reason why I still keep making videos are guys like you, which are supporting me on Patreon and giving only $1 a month, because it don't hurt you and it helps me a lot. You will find all links as well as the link to my Facebook page down in the comment section below. I hope you liked this video. Feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. Subscribe if you not already have. And we will see us in my next video in the Tyrolean Alps making an overnighter. So stay tuned for that. Have a nice evening and goodbye.